Sometimes you'll walk into a room and you just don't fit in.
It feels like you're an outsider, and it hurts to be an outsider.
Uncomfortable, uneasy, unsure.
There's a lot of fear.
And fear is a consuming emotion. Fear is a distracting emotion.
I just want you to acknowledge that I exist.
I didn't realize I was trans for the longest time.
I was raised by my mother and her partner, and also my father.
I'm unique because I'm half Filipino and half Irish.
My parents migrated from Haiti in 1968.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My mom was a telephone operator. I'm a Bell baby.
I grew up in South Dakota, and my first exposure to a gay person was Matthew Shepard.
The experience that most women have that a lot will resonate with is they'll say something in a meeting, it won't get acknowledged. Somebody else will say the exact same thing and they'll say, what a brilliant idea. And she's sitting there going, I just said that.
I've been denied a job because of my sexual orientation.
I have a lot of biases and I see the world through a very specific lens.
And so I have to really check my own bias.
I have just as much growing and just as much learning as anyone else to do.
I want to be a part of a world where everybody can be the best version of themselves.
Having a diverse culture really is an advantage to building one of the best companies in the world.
It's not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do.
You need people who can actually bring different perspectives.
You can be trans, you can be gay, you can be black, you can be Muslim.
A lot of people with disabilities have strong problem-solving skills.
Our customers are diverse.
We as leaders, we as trailblazers, we have to think about the next generation.
My generation wants to be able to work in an environment where they're able to be their true selves.
You know, Salesforce, they're trying to learn how to do this thing right.
We're flawed. We have a lot of work to do, but we care about this issue.
For equality to be successful, we just have to learn how to be allies.
There's always someone who's in the shadows. There's always someone who's not being included.
You have to bring people up with you.
Making people feel comfortable in their own skin.
And if that weight is taken off of me, I'm able to rise above. And, you know, it's amazing.
I can bring my whole self to what I'm doing.
Be confident and stand in my truth of who I am. For the very first time in my entire lifetime, I get to bring my authentic self to work.
And if we can just reach enough people, if we can just demonstrate that shared humanity, that we can not just win the conversation and win the day, but win equality for every person in every corner of this country and around the world.
At Salesforce, we're part of a movement
for a more equal
and more diverse future.
We are committed to equal pay
for equal work.
Make a difference.
Be a trailblazer.
And join us on the path to equality for all.
All right. Good afternoon, Trailblazers. So we are delighted to host you this afternoon for the Equality Keynote. We have an incredible conversation coming up with someone who is the epitome of a trailblazer. And hopefully you enjoyed the keynote this morning. I thought all elements of it were really, really remarkable. But one thing that really moved me was listening to Zach. And listening to Zach tell his personal story and the story of a trailblazer and how he was motivated and inspired by just the basic needs of his family and wanting to have a job where he could balance career and his family life and spend time with his family and make a great living wage, and how the Salesforce community provided that for him. So that was super, super inspirational for me. And this whole event, our whole ethos is about the celebration of trailblazers. And by way of proxy, I'm going to point to a few trailblazers here and celebrate them, and these should be familiar faces. Stephanie Herrera, Shona Hughes, Raby De La Paz. I know Shona and Raby are here today. That's right. Give it up. You wonder what a trailblazer looks like. Take a look. Take a look. And then look around. Look to your left. Look to your right. In this room, literally, look to your left and look to your right. These are the equality trailblazers. These are icons that represent the work of all of you and the amazing work that they have done in pioneering so many dimensions of this incredible mosaic that we're building to drive equality for all, from women in tech to Salesforce Saturdays to founding with Selena Suarez, who's here as well and not in the photo. All right, Selena, stand up, Selena, be acknowledged, because unfortunately, I was telling Selena last night that we need a photo with all four of them. And then we said, since Stephanie's not here this week, we'll take a photo without Stephanie and we'll kind of Photoshop it and we'll create this montage and they will all be in there together. But wow, you talk about pioneers, you know, you talk about trailblazers, and what they've done in founding Pep Up Tech is this incredible innovation. And we're beginning to see the impact of it, and we'll be sitting here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and looking at the alumni of Pep Up Tech and saying, wow, look at that startup company over there. Look at that well-established tech company over there being led by a Pep Up Tech alumni. And we'll look back to these founders that founded this movement and just celebrate, you know, their vision and their commitment to transforming the world. And the essence of what they're doing is making sure that nobody is left behind in this fourth industrial revolution. And you heard it, and Keith was right on point today about what's happening with this fourth industrial revolution. And I love the retrospective. You think about the former three industrial revolutions and that first industrial revolution where humankind, for the first time, actually unlocked the power of fire. So the steam engine, and eventually the internal combustion engine. And that literally changed everything from transportation and how things got to market. And it was one of the fundamental forces that broke down the agrarian society. And then we unlocked the magic, the invisible magic of magnetism and electricity, right? And that's how we have urban society. You would not have high-rise buildings. You would not have Moscone West. There would be no lighting, no escalators, no elevators, no air conditioning. We could not live the way that we do without that industrial revolution. Again, it literally changed everything. Then that third industrial revolution and the power of the transistor, and that was multiplied through Moore's law, and then ultimately resulting in mobile revolution and the social revolution and the cloud. And here we are and all of those changed everything. But buckle up, because this next industrial revolution is going to be the fusion of all of those things. And while those former revolutions, they freed our bodies, were formerly, before the first industrial revolution, everything that happened in society was through the power of human muscles or animals or moving water or wind if you're on the ocean. And now you have the incredible power of machines. And then the third industrial revolution, beginning to free our minds, not our imagination, but freeing our minds from repetitive tasks. But this fourth industrial revolution is going to truly, in my opinion, lay the foundation and create the potential for humankind to realize its ultimate potential. Or not. Or not. And so my view is that every company that is building a platform, Salesforce included, has a responsibility to make sure that that platform isn't agnostic per se, but that make sure the platform is used ultimately for the good of society. All the best minds in society, the truly best minds in society, are thinking about these issues. I had the opportunity to attend Grace Hopper in 2017 as an ally, just there sitting and listening to many brilliant minds, one of them Melinda Gates, and I'll read her words verbatim. She said, "Now, you often hear that the big challenge is teaching machines to think and behave more like humans. But I can't help but think that we should be more specific. We don't want to teach computers racism or sexism or selfishness or greed. We want to teach computers the very best of what humanity has to offer. And for that to happen, we need the people building AI to represent not just one small slice of the human experience, but all genders, all ethnicities. I would add all religions, all sexual orientations, all gender identities, all the dimensions of all the unique facets that make each of us our identity and how we identify. And that is a core principle for Salesforce, that every human life has equal value, and that none of us can truly be equal until all of us are equal. And so, together with the community. One of the things I would just, as a preface, when we talk about Salesforce, hopefully the tone comes through, and I'm going to underline it now. We're doing it with a tone of humility. There's no pretense that we have all the answers here. We're on a journey. But on that journey, we have the North Star in the journey, and we keep going north. Sometimes we might waver in northwest and northeast, but we recenter on the North Star of forging this path to equality for all and equality for everyone, regardless of their race or their religion or their national origin, or their gender identity, or their sexual orientation, or any other dimension that defines them. That's the journey that we're on. We are partners together in this journey. You inspire us along this journey. And a core element, and really one of the defining stories for Salesforce in this journey, and we still have more work to do, but a core element that defines us has been the stance that we've taken for equal pay. Equal pay for equal work, that your value should not be defined by your gender identity. Equal pay for equal work. And this is a defining story. And like all great stories, it has incredible heroes. But in this story, the heroes aren't who you expect the heroes to be. You would think, well, Mark is the hero, or Parker are the heroes as the co-founders of the business. No, the heroes of the story are actually Cindy Robbins, who leads employee success for Salesforce, and Layla Seca, who leads the App Exchange. And they were the courageous leaders who had the courage to come to Mark and say, hey, we think we have a problem. We think that women are paid differently than men in this company. And Mark, while skeptical, wanted to know the truth and empower them to go get the facts. And they went on an exhaustive survey, and over the course of the next 2 years, we invested $6 million to make it right, to make sure that women were paid the same as men for the same work, so that we could plant a flag and to be, hopefully, a standard bearer for other organizations, for-profit or nonprofit, government institutions or educational institutions, for equal pay for equal work. And so, no, absolutely. And it predated me. So this is a story that one of the things that magnetically drew me to Salesforce and wanted to be part of this amazing, amazing community. And so inspired by that. And we have many, many great and exceptional leaders. And I think if you listen, if you go out into the campground and you see the equality booth out there, part of the messaging that you'll see and part of our mission is to encourage everyone to be an ally. Now, being an ally doesn't mean you have to agree. So we can all be allies. You think if there's X hundred people in the room, there's X hundred opinions on almost any given topic. So it doesn't mean as one Ohana, as one extended family, as one chosen family, that we're going to agree on every single issue. But we're going to stand beside each other. We're going to listen. We're going to try to be empathetic. We're going to try to be supportive. And so that's the core of the essence of what we're asking people to do, is to listen and ask to the stories of others with empathy, reserving judgment, then showing up and speaking up for the folks that you are allied with. Now, one of the essential examples I've seen in my experience here with Salesforce, and it is my favorite, one of my favorite examples of the notion of being an ally. Here's Mark. Right? And this was the Women's March in 2017. The important thing is, that's not Mark the CEO, that's Citizen Mark. That's not a sign that Salesforce marketing made, right? That's a sign, Mark's got 2 young daughters, and I have a theory about how the sign was constructed, but I'm not going to speculate, how the sign was actually constructed, right? But that's Citizen Mark, standing up as an ally for the empowerment of women and girls around the world. But the messaging is spot on, equal pay for equal work. And so we're working to amplify and to extend those efforts to be an ally for every community, of every identity around the world. I think many of you know that we have these employee resource groups. We call them Ohana groups. One of them is Outforce, and that is an employee resource group for people that identify as LGBTQ or their allies. And so about a month ago, we launched Outforce in India. And for those of you that are familiar with the situation in India, you would recognize that LGBTQ people in India do not have the same rights and protections that we have even here in the US. In the US, we don't have the rights and protections that LGBTQ people deserve. But in India, it's worse. And so we went to try to help and empower the broader community. This happens to be Hyderabad, by launching Outforce there and marching in pride in Hyderabad. And so this is our Ohana, and we showed up together, all volunteers just showing up. A few of us showed up from headquarters. And we're there to be an ally to the LGBTQ community in Hyderabad and in Salesforce in Hyderabad. And you think it would have great effect, except we wouldn't know initially because nobody was out. There was not one person in the Salesforce office in Hyderabad that was out until we launched Outforce. Then one person came out. So for those of you that are great at math, what's the percentage increase in the amount of folks that were out in the office? Denominator is 0, right? So literally an infinite increase. And you think about that person, right? So imagine living your life, walking into the office every day, and the back of your mind or your prefrontal cortex is working to say, well, last time I told that person this and they asked that, and how do I make sure I don't tell them something that's going to out me in some way, and spending 10, 20, 30, 40% of your mental energy capacity just trying not to out yourself. And that day that person came out, that person's now free. And that fraction of their brain that was used to do all this calculus to make sure they weren't outing themselves is now free to do whatever that person chooses to do with that fraction of their brilliance. And so when we talk about allowing people to do the very best work of their careers, if you're using some substantial fraction of your brain just to process something like that, or you're processing as a black person, for example, the notion of, well, did that happen because I was black, or did that happen because I made a big mistake, you know? And you're processing these things all the time. How are you actually getting the very best out of people? See, that's why these things make a difference and drive greater innovation and drive better business outcomes, because you're freeing people to focus their mind on the task at hand and to do the best work of their careers. Similarly, we have an organization called Bold Force. That's the Black Organization for Leadership Development. These are the leaders of Bold Force. This photo was taken about two months ago at the MLK March here in San Francisco. And what I love about the picture is you see between Bree and Allie, who are the co-presidents of Bold Force, that little hat right there. And that little hat, that's Charlie Isaacs. Okay. And so Charlie is the ultimate ally. The ultimate ally. And in fact, there's Charlie. I see Charlie right there. Charlie, stand up. Okay. Okay. Now someday I'll get to the bottom of this. Was Charlie supposed to be in the picture? Or is he like photobombing the picture, right? But I love the picture and this notion of having allies, because the former year where we weren't so emphatic about inviting allies, so in 2017, the MLK March, we had about 100 people showed up, most of them black. In 2018, about 1,100 people showed up. As you can see, most of them not black, right? And that's the power of inviting allies on your journey with you, that you'll never walk back into the office. This was January 15th. On January 16th, not feeling alone, you're looking right next to you, to your left and to your right, and there's your allies there with you. They stood in solidarity with you. Not necessarily meaning they agreed on literally every social, regulatory, legal issue or political issue with you, but they're there to say that they support you as a family member. So super, super powerful, super empowering for anyone to know that their colleagues and peers are standing with them as allies. And so I use this journey, the civil rights journey, a bit as a metaphor and analogy for all the journeys on every dimension, for every dimension of equality, from national origin to religion to sexual orientation to gender identity to differences in ability, whether visible or invisible, right, is an analogy. And the civil rights journey, and we have one of the pioneers, and we're going to talk to her and have an incredible conversation with her in a moment, right, is here in the room with us. And we've made some progress, but there's more work to be done for sure. So let's take just a brief retrospective on some of the voices from some of the Salesforce events talking about the journey for civil rights and equality for blacks in the United States of America.
This is a seminal Civil Rights 2.0, what are you doing every single day moment. This is it.
There is a lot of responsibility with that word activism, whether you have a voice or not. Either you talk about it or you be about it and you do about it.
I don't care how you fight, fight until your voice is heard. You have a voice. If you did not have a voice, you wouldn't be here.
When we see something that is not right, not fair, not just, we have a moral obligation to speak up and speak out and do something about it.
We stand against the hatred. We stand against the violence. Even in the darkest hour, we saw the healing power of love to light a path forward to an age of equality.
We made a decision to march in an orderly fashion from Selma to Montgomery. But last year, I had the honor to go back to Selma, and it was my honor to introduce President Barack Obama. So when people tell me nothing has changed, I feel like saying, come and walk in my shoes, and I will show you change.
So that video, that's a great prelude to our conversation, and your life has spanned all of those events. And
Yes.
so I'm gonna, if you allow me, just give a brief introduction on some of the key elements, and but I won't preempt any of the conversation.
Okay.
Right, but absolutely. We talk about trailblazers, and I think if you've observed here, you can see. Look around. We're in love with the national parks, right? We're in love with the national parks, right? And so.
So am I.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Okay. So we have that in common already. So you are the epitome of what we mean by a trailblazer, and we're going to explore that in a bit. So you settled in the Bay Area in 1927 from New Orleans. Your work career has spanned decades and decades and decades, and it continues to this day. And one of the points was, we'll explore this a little bit, was working in the segregated union halls here in the Bay Area. And I'm sure some people are like, well, what do you mean, segregation in the Bay Area? And so you can tell us a little bit more about what that was like. That was during World War II, right? On to, fast forwarding to, you were a delegate at the Democratic National Convention for George McGovern, right?
Right.
So that's quite a span from segregation to being a DNC delegate. In 1996, you were named Woman of the Year by the California State Legislature, and you were awarded the Sierra Club's Trailblazer Award.
Yes.
So at 96, you are the oldest active national park ranger.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you.
So let's explore some elements of that history and the amazing lessons and wisdom that you can share with us, as well as your vision for the future, right?
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about, first of all, tell us about this picture. Who are these folks? What was life like?
Oh, those are my two sisters and me. I'm in the middle. My sister Lottie is on the left. Marjorie is on the right. We grew up at a time when it's so hard to make the bridge between where we are now and the time that I grew up. Because when I was growing up, all of Northern California, I don't think had more than 10 or 15,000 African Americans between Sacramento and Seaside, California. This was a time, of course, when segregation and bigotry existed, but they were not formalized as they are in the South. So I grew up not so much as an African American, but as a second-generation Californian at a time when that was possible. I also grew up at a time when I was 20 years old, where some of your pictures are going to show that. I was a clerk in a Jim Crow union hall, because when the Second World War happened, that would have been about a decade before the labor movement would be racially integrated. So that in order to comply with the demands of the Maritime Commission, the unions created auxiliaries, 3 of them, to service the shipyards. There was one at Marin Ship in Sausalito, another in West Oakland, a third in Richmond, which was Boilermakers Auxiliary 36, in which auxiliary was a fancy word for Jim Crow, and which all the black workers were dumped, and we paid dues, but we didn't have any vote. That was at such a different time in our nation's, in the democracy's development. For instance, it took $47.25 a week to support a family of 5 in 1942. $47.25 a week. Black men were all in the service workers generation, earning $25 to $35 a week. Pullman porters earned $18 a week plus tips. That's who we were as a nation in those years.
And for black women, what were the typical outcomes and choices?
Well, the park where I'm working was created to honor the women of World War II. Rosie the Riveter, Homefront National Historical Park. But that did not speak to me, not 1 minute, because the women in my family had been working outside their homes since slavery, because it had always taken 2 wages to support black families. Few men could do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Few men. So to try to compare those years with what you are all living in now, it's almost impossible. That we're talking now about equality of pay for women. I come from a time when a successful woman was a woman who was married by the time she was 23 and had her first child by the time she was 25. That's what defined a successful woman. Working women did not exist in my time. I was a stay-at-home mother till I was 50. Had my first job when I was 50 years old. My first significant job.
Wow.
I'm a late bloomer. I became a permanent park ranger at the age of 85. I spend much of my time out of context, living in a world of the young, having outlived all my peers, most of them, at a time at 96 when I've lost my sense of future, where there are no models for me anymore. It's not only that, but I've outlived all the naysayers in my life. So life for me is a grand improvisation day after day. I get to make it up as I go along. But sitting in these rooms, and I've been doing that a lot lately, with a generation that's the generation of my grandchildren, is sometimes disorienting. But it leads me to the first time in my life when I've ever really envied the young. Because now I'm looking for a Faustian bargain for 20 more years.
You did. We were talking earlier, though, and you shared some things, and I was like, anyone who actually knows me would be, this would be a natural line of questioning. I would say, what's your secret to youth? And one of the things you shared was the notion of staying contemporary, and how you stay contemporary. And we were having a conversation at lunch, and someone asked you something about being contemporary, about using technology, and you mentioned you've been blogging for 20 years.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
So maybe just tell us a little bit more about why that's important, how you've done that, how that's affected you, and the notion about not having role models. Now you are like the role model. I actually told you backstage, literally, I want to be you. Right? So that you are now my role model and my icon, to aspire to be like you in the next decades of my life and career.
Yeah.
But tell us more about the notion of staying contemporary.
Well, having lived my entire life in a constant state of surprise, it's hard for me to give a really straight answer to that. I think in looking back, because most of the lessons I've learned in retrospect. It's always in looking back. Where I've lost my sense of future, my sense of the past has been enhanced. So that I can now see all those stages of life that I couldn't see when I was living through them. And I now know that I have been contemporary my whole life, that I've always only had now, that there's never been much of regret of the past or anticipation of the future. It's always been what's right before me. Yeah. I think that's the only way I could have lived.
And one of the brilliant examples was your activism. And so, from in the 50s, well, actually, you told me the time frame, because I'm going to imagine what it was. You tell us, what was the time frame, and when did the seed of activism, when did that germinate and spring up and flourish inside of you?
I think had I ever known what lay ahead, or if I were the kind of person who was a list maker, or that I needed to do planning, that I don't think I could have lived through the life that I've lived. There's been so much pain and sorrow and pleasure, none of which was I prepared for. The civil rights movement happened at a time when I was living with my family as the only black family in the Diablo Valley. I was living in an area between Saranac and between Lafayette and Walnut Creek in a home that we built in 1953. That home was built by my husband and myself, who had both grown up as second-generation Californians. Mel was a third-generation Californian. His family had made its way out across the country from Griffin, Georgia, at the first sound of cannon fire, the Civil War. And Mel, his father, and his grandmother were all born in Berkeley General Hospital. And I came here as a 6-year-old. So that when the war ended, we felt entitled to be wherever we wanted to be. We didn't have any of the formal hostility of Southern segregation, which had come in with the migrant workers during World War II, settled in the Bay Area. Because Henry Kaiser did his most aggressive recruiting in the 5 southern states of Mississippi, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana. So suddenly, we're involved. And we lived under death threats for 5 years. The first year that my youngster, my 3rd grader, entered into his elementary school, the fundraiser that year was a minstrel show. And all the teachers and the administrators were in blackface. That's the world of the 50s that we lived in. That same community, 20 years later, sent me to represent them to the Miami Convention, which indicates how fast social change was occurring in the Bay Area. That was heady. Now, at the same time that was true, I was an activist nationally in the Black Caucus of the Unitarian Church, which meant that I was meeting nationally in groups of black intellectuals across the country. At a time of black definition, a time when black became beautiful. Living at a time when I was not quite white enough for the suburbs and not quite black enough for the Black Revolution. So all of that formed the person that you see now, because now I am working for the National Park Service as a park ranger, and I'm using everything I have ever learned right this minute.
You know, and the breadth of your activism, as I understand it,
yeah.
You tell me more if I have this wrong, expanded so that making sure that in the national parks, that the history of the Latinx and Hispanic community, that the history of internment of the Japanese community, that these things were not forgotten. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't think that I seem to be always working beyond my capacity. And when I came into Richmond back about 15 years ago, it was at a time when I came in. I was working in Richmond as a 20-year-old clerk in the Jim Crow Union Hall. I lived in the suburbs for over 20 years and returned as a field representative for a member of the California State Assembly. And that does not indicate personal achievement, but a solid indication of how much social change occurred over those years. And in my district, as a field representative, this park, to be an homage to the women of World War II, Rosie the Riveter, came into being. And I attended those meetings in order to report back to our field staff what was happening in my district. And I met the scattered sites that were defining this park. They lay throughout Richmond, and instantly recognized them as sites of racial segregation, because the planners are gathered in Richmond to begin to determine the shape that this national park was going to be taking. But I was the only black person in the room. And what gets defined is determined by who's in the room doing the remembering. And there wasn't anybody else in that room that had any reason to know that but me. All of those sites of racial segregation were what I saw as being the grounding for a national park that was going to distort the truth of that period, because my history was not represented in any of it. The park then began to see itself as not only Rosie the Riveter, but as representing the home front story, because there was not only the story of Rosie the Riveter, but there was a story of 120,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans interned who lost 2.5 years of their lives and much of their treasure. As it turned out, there was not one single sign of sabotage or any kind of hostility ever proven against any of those people. And of the 120,000, 70,000 were American citizens. They lost 2.5 years of their lives and much of their treasure simply because they looked like the enemy. It was the first unrecorded case of racial profiling, but that was before the concept had been born.
And history repeats itself.
Yeah.
And repeats itself.
Yeah.
And rinses and repeats.
But it was also the story of that explosion at Port Chicago that vaporized 2 Kaiser ships. An explosion right here at the Conqueror's Weapons Station, in which 320 lives were lost, and 202 of them were black dock workers. And because 50 of those men refused to go back to load those ships because nobody could explain what had happened, what had caused the explosion, they were tried in mutiny trials because they refused an order during wartime. That was the only time in history that we ever tried 50 people in one trial and found them all guilty and sentenced to 8 to 15 years in prison. All of the officers were white and all of the dock workers were black, and all of the whites were given 30 days trauma leave, while the dock workers were all ordered back to work immediately, collecting body parts, into which they were placed into 22 caskets and buried as unknowns at San Bruno Cemetery. And it wasn't until I became a park ranger that I realized that there was a colored section in a federal cemetery on the West Coast. All of that history, all of it, had been lost. And here was a chance to tell that history, to share it, because the myths that we made up about that period were so much less important or powerful than the truth as we had lived it, but those of us who had lived it. And so I stopped working for the state of California and became a consultant to the National Park Service in order to see that that history embraced all of its truths. And that's what I'm still doing. Thank you.
Right. You know, there's so much power, so many powerful lessons in what you said. It's too much to unpack, but just the notion, the power of being the only one in the room and being courageous enough to speak up. The notion of history lost, you know, when history books are written and no one that looks like whomever is, you know, has the typewriter or the digital keyboard in their hands when the history is written, and history forgotten, and often history makes it seem like some of the things that were less savory didn't actually happen.
That's true.
So it's, you know, it's thank you for your courage, and it's a powerful, powerful example to all of us. And you've been widely recognized. Now, you had a chance to visit the White House. I think you were at the inauguration formally.
Yes.
Maybe tell us a little bit about that recognition, what happened there, what that felt like.
I was invited by the Department of Interior 2 years ago. To participate in the national tree lighting ceremony with the Obamas. It was an amazing, amazing experience. I got to introduce him on PBS at the Christmas special. Got to meet the Obamas. There was one snag, and that was that there were 3 tents. There was a 10 by 10 tent in which the first lady and the president were standing between the presidential flag and the flag of the United States. And I was ushered in to see them. And when I met the president and he put out his hand, I put out mine, and he cupped his over mine and transferred the presidential seal in a coin into my hand in secret. So it was, because it was a secret, it was so powerful. But
I got goosebumps when you said that.
Yeah, but the thing that was even more impressive was that the other tent held the entertainers who were going to be part of the PBS special. And all of the celebrities of the day were gathered there who were going to be participating. And I've been able to bring my 2 granddaughters along with me, one a sophomore and the other a freshman in college. And they were so impressed with all of the celebrities there, and because of my age, the only celebrity I recognized was Miss Piggy.
I'll have to drink to that.
But it was something I will never forget. I slept with the presidential seal under my pillow for about a month.
So, look, we had a conversation earlier, and you told me something, and it really struck me. This notion that your great-grandfather was able to predict the future more or less and prepare your grandfather for what lied ahead.
Yes.
And then your grandfather was able to predict the future and tell your father what lied ahead. But that history started changing so quickly that...
Oh, the rate of change is so rapid that I have no idea what kind of world that my grandchildren are going to be growing up, nor can I prepare them for it. No, that's true.
So what counsel do you give your grandchildren?
Well, you have to remember that when my great-grandmother was born into slavery in 1846, she lived to be 102, not dying until 1948. I knew my slave ancestor. I was 27 years old, married and a mother by the time my slave ancestor died. And she had raised all of the significant adults in my life, including my mother. But she was born into a world of less than 2 billion people. And 4 generations later, I am in a world approaching 8 billion people.
Wow.
Can you imagine the kind of social history that would have created? It's just amazing.
Well, you are an icon and a hero, and the essence of when we think about, in this community, we think about trailblazers. You know, in my mind, your face will come up when we think about it. We really look forward to the future of what you're going to accomplish, and you're always welcome in this extended family. Now, the family has a little event this evening, and so we want to encourage everyone to think about showing up this evening. It's at the Masonic. You know, doors open about 6:30. We have these amazing equality awards. And so here are some of the folks that are being acknowledged this evening. Stevie Wonder, Evan Rachel Wood.
Oh, my goodness.
Posthumously, Mayor Ed Lee, right? The great journalist and author Emily Chang. And then our beloved Shona Hughes as well from the community.
Oh, nice.
So it'd be a delightful evening, fun-filled, evening not to be missed. Hope to see you all there this evening. Really grateful for you all investing your time and you sharing your amazing story. And we look forward to the stories that are being generated right now that you'll be sharing with us in the future and the days ahead.
Thank you very
Thank you so
much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.